Hello, my name is Mark, and I am the managing editor at Flash Fiction Magazine. In addition to working as an editor, I'm also an English professor with an emphasis in writing instruction, and I hold an MFA in creative writing. Over the years, reading and editing thousands of stories for Flash Fiction Magazine, it's become remarkably clear that there are many aspiring writers out there trying to get published. When I say aspiring, I mean people who want to be writers, people who have good, sometimes great ideas, but generally lack some of the basic fiction writing skills necessary to transform or translate those ideas into engaging stories. I don't mean to say this with disdain or elitist editorial judgment. All of the submissions that we receive demonstrate serious effort, and it's so great seeing so many people putting their best words forward. Well, let's be honest, some stories simply work better than others. Some stories engage us in such a way that they pull us out of our heads for a time and leave us feeling a little changed. In this How to Write Flash Fiction mini course, I am going to give you some of my best tips on writing flash fiction and fiction in general. By the time you finish the third lesson, you will have some key insights and helpful tools to write more compelling stories that engage readers and potentially impress editors. Here are three things that you can expect to learn. 1. You will learn how to begin engaging readers through their senses rather than just their minds. 2. You will learn how to begin creating and writing compelling and memorable characters. And 3. You will learn one of the best kept secrets that separates amateur writers from the professionals. There are a few myths out there when it comes to writing fiction. One myth is that successful fiction writers are simply more talented than everyone else. While talent is undoubtedly a contributing factor for some, especially as they're starting out, the truth is most, if not all, successful writers work very hard at their craft. That is to say, they approach writing as a skill or set of skills in constant need of practice and refinement. Another myth about writing fiction is that good reading makes for good writing. What I mean by this is when people read stories, they can tell, sometimes from the get-go, that the writing is good or bad. Often it's the latter when a story is badly written that inspires aspiring writers to think, hey, I can write better than this. While this might be true, the reality is that reading good quality fiction and writing good quality fiction are two very different things. Another way of putting it, just because someone can identify a well-written story from a poorly written story does not automatically mean that they can articulate what about the writing is either good or bad. Usually, not everyone, but usually people judge stories on a gut feeling, and that gut feeling is usually based on the content, the message, what happened in the story, and not the actual writing. Interestingly, ironically enough, I would argue that many of the best written stories are so well crafted that the writing falls away from bringing attention to itself. In other words, stories of the highest caliber are so immersive and engaging that the reader forgets they are reading a story altogether. Yet another related myth is the idea that if a story is published, it must be good. Someone, an editor or publisher, someone who obviously knows what they're doing, thought the story was worthy of publication, so it obviously must be good writing. This, sadly, is not the case. As you may already know, there are thousands, if not millions, of stories and books and all kinds of writing that gets published all the time despite its low quality. As both an instructor and editor, I find this particular truth both inspiring but also disturbing. Inspiring because it's good that people are getting the opportunity to publish their work. That's a good thing. But it's a little disturbing because bad writing promotes the idea that anyone can get published, which isn't true and shouldn't I think, be true. I also find bad writing, when published, keeps readers in the dark from what they could be experiencing. That is to say, good writing is quite often so much more engaging and entertaining, and it's too bad, right, that people are wasting their time reading stories that are only so-so. From an instructor's perspective, it also reinforces bad writing habits and the idea that all you need is a good idea regardless of skill. The last myth about writing fiction and or writing in general that I want to address is the notion that if someone wants to write and perhaps published, all you have to do is write a lot. Sure, there is something to be gained by establishing a discipline of some kind and generating a lot of material on a regular basis. But the reality is, if someone is continuously making the same kinds of mistakes over and over, writing poorly with low-level skills, all that really does is reinforce the bad writing. Even if you're writing every day without some kind of quality control, there's little to no guarantee that you're going to get better over time. So, when a great flash fiction story comes my way, I don't think to myself, wow, this author is very talented. I think, wow, this author knows what they're doing. They've clearly taken the time to study and develop some fiction writing skills. So, when it comes to developing strong flash fiction and fiction writing skills in general, there's really only good news. As varied and complex as many stories are, all good fiction boils down to a relatively finite list of essential considerations and techniques. One of the more important considerations is the simple question of point of view. For example, many submissions we receive are written using first-person narration. That's when the narrator uses the pronoun I or we and narrates events from their point of view and or shares their thoughts and feelings directly with the reader. First-person narration itself isn't inherently problematic. In fact, when done well, it's extremely effective, and many of the world's greatest stories are written in first person. There is, however, a tendency when writing in first person to over-narrate, and I see it happen all the time. More specifically, many first-person narrators explicitly tell the reader exactly what they're thinking and feeling all the time in abstract language. Listen, for example, to the following sentence. When I was younger, it was easier to feel happy. Simple enough, right? It's clear what's being said. The narrator found it easier to feel happy when they were younger. Well, here's the thing about the word happy. It's an abstraction. It doesn't actually conjure the feeling of happiness. Now listen to this. When I was younger, the sun felt warmer on my face, and my feet felt lighter skipping down the sidewalk. In this version, we have concrete details, specific images, sun, face, feet, sidewalk, and specific descriptions and actions felt warmer, felt lighter, skipping, that altogether create sensory imagery in the reader's mind. Sensory imagery is what appeals to a reader's senses, sight, sound, taste, touch, and this tends to make a deeper and more lasting impact. Put another way, the first version is something said or told, and the second is something described or imagined. Now ask yourself this, what are you going to remember? The word happy or the image of someone's face in warm sunlight skipping down the sidewalk? Which of these two did you feel? The lesson here is simple, yes, but profoundly underutilized by would-be and novice writers, by aspiring writers. When a reader engages their senses in this kind of concrete sensory imagery, the easier it becomes to imagine the story happening in their mind. The more vivid a reader, the more vividly the reader imagines a story, the more likely they are to forget they are reading a story altogether, which is the gold medal of all fiction writing. That isn't to say that all aspiring writers need to do is simply add more sensory detail to their stories and make them more engaging. No, there is definitely such a thing as too much detail, too much sensory description, too much detail about something that doesn't feel relevant. And this is especially true when it comes to writing flash fiction or short stories, which begs the question, how much is too much? I wish I had an easy answer for that. What I can tell you is that there are some easy strategies for gauging the effectiveness of your writing, which I will be sharing with you in a later lesson. Now, some of you may be thinking, hey, aren't there books about writing? Why can't I just read one of those and get better? Not unlike the myth that writing or that good reading makes for good writing, reading about writing likely won't make you a better writer in and of itself. It may feed your imagination, give you new ideas, inspire you, and motivate you, but it doesn't get the work done. Without practice and experience, it's impossible to strengthen your writing skills. In the next videos, I am going to tell you exactly how to get more of both, practice and experience, along with some key ingredients to becoming a better fiction writer. Before I go, I have a mini writing prompt for you that I encourage you to try and then post as a comment under this video. Consider the example I gave about writing in first person. When I was younger, it was easier to feel happy versus when I was younger, the sun felt warmer on my feet, on my face, and my feet felt lighter skipping down the sidewalk. Try writing your own version, replacing my concrete sensory details with your own. So instead of when I was younger, it was easier, or sorry, when it was younger, the sun felt warmer on my face, you would say, when I was younger, popcorn tasted saltier. You get the idea. Again, leave your practice writing below in the comments section, and questions or comments are encouraged and welcome. I look forward to hearing from you.